And welcome back to the Flow Sports Fix on this Thursday evening. It's time for the Statman with his possibly 9 winners. He needs to redeem himself. Can he do it, Statman? Over to you.
Thanks, Clayton. Yes, I'm going to do my absolute best to redeem my poor tipping from last week and try and climb my way back up the ladder. But maybe if you're listening across our Flow network today after last week's pitiful return of just 2 correct tips, my goodness, might be best to tip whoever I'm tipping against this week, perhaps. Anyway, let's have a look and see. Let's go to Friday night's clash. What a game this is between Richmond and Geelong. And this isn't a good start because I'll be quite honest with you here, folks. I've got absolutely no idea who's going to win this game of football. It could be either of these two sides. It really is a 50-50 proposition. Trent Cotchin out for Richmond. They will get Dustin Martin back in, though. There's a couple of other ins and outs for both sides, but the only thing I can go on here is at the MCG, Richmond have an imperious record. They've beaten the Cats, of course, grand final time. Mind you, it must be said, the grand final replay matches that Richmond have played in since winning premierships, they lost to the Crows in 2018 in their first rematch after the 2017 grand final, and then they lost to the Giants in their first rematch after the 2019 grand final. So not good record there. I'm going to go with the Tigers, though, just on the back of the fact that the Cats couldn't find a way to get it done, even though they pretty much outplayed the Swans last week. And Richmond, with Dustin Martin back in at the MCG, seems to me that the Tigers might get the job done there. We move on to Saturday. The tipping doesn't get much easier. GWS taking on the Bombers, who were disappointing against Carlton last week, Essendon, and they'll be a bit grumpy. They'll be looking to bounce back, but the Giants have been in very good form. They flogged the Crows last week. Some of their prime movers are up and going again. Kelly was outstanding in the ruck. Mumford's been going well, and good to say, Toby Green having re-signed with the club is a good sign. He's been playing some good footy as well. So I think the GWS Giants at home will be just a little bit too good for the Bombers. Up at the Gold Coast, here's an interesting game. At Metricon, the Suns hosting St Kilda. It's worth noting the time of this particular game too, 1:40 p.m. on a Saturday. So it will be warm. The Saints bounced back to some sort of form last week. They've been terrible for most of the year, but they were very good last week. Paddy Ryder is back for them, which helps, along with Rowan Marshall. Their 1-2 punch in the ruck looks much better. The Suns were very good against Collingwood at the MCG. They will be chock full of confidence, and I'm actually going to tip the Suns here on their home deck to get the job done again. We go to, wow, what a game this is. The clash of the wooden spoon, perhaps. North Melbourne and Collingwood. Who would have thought we'd be saying that? Maybe about North Melbourne, but certainly not about Collingwood. Nathan Buckley, will he be gone if North Melbourne able to get over the line here? North were very good last week for 3 quarters against the top of the ladder Melbourne. Collingwood were, I guess, pedestrian at best in their clash against the Gold Coast Suns. They didn't get flogged, but they never really looked in any danger of actually winning the game on their home deck. I'm going to tip an upset here, and I'm going to tip North Melbourne to beat Collingwood and record their first win of the season. And if that happens, oh, gee whiz, there'll be plenty of soul-searching to be done at the Westpac Centre. Another cracking game on Saturday evening. We'll see Melbourne taking on the Sydney Swans, who got out of jail against the Cats last week at their home ground. This will be at the MCG. Christian Petrarca re-signing with the club for, I think, 7 years. And they've had a few other re-signings recently. It all seems to be going swimmingly well for Melbourne, who were pressured last week by North Melbourne for the first half, but like good sides do, found another gear when they needed it. And I think they'll beat the Swans at the MCG. And then, of course, the big rivalry in football, showdown time at the Adelaide Oval. The Port Adelaide side disappointing last week at the Gabba against the Brisbane Lions. The Adelaide Crows even more so against the GWS Giants. They were terrible. So both sides needing to bounce back off of losses. Look, the reality is here, Port Adelaide should win. They are the better of the two sides on paper. But showdowns are not played on paper. They're played on an oval for a reason. So can the Crows upset the Power? It's the Power's home game. So there'll be lots of Port Adelaide supporters in full capacity at Adelaide Oval as well. So you can bet your bottom dollar there'll be 50,000 people there screaming, and the majority of them will be barracking for Port Adelaide. Do Port Adelaide have the defensive prowess to keep a lid on Tex Walker? He's been pretty quiet the last couple of weeks. There's some concerns around his calf. And likewise, can the Crows defenders keep a lid on Port Adelaide's small forwards who've been doing the damage? And can Charlie Dixon break free and maybe kick a few? So I think Port Adelaide should win this relatively comfortably in the end. We move to Sunday's matches. Hawthorn at the MCG taking on the West Coast Eagles, who don't like travelling to Melbourne, let's be honest. But the MCG is a different proposition for these Eagles. They play reasonably well there over the journey. So Hawthorn struggled last week. Their form has been pretty poor for most of the year. Outside of a come-from-behind victory against the Crows, they've been terrible most of the year, the Hawks, and I can just see the Eagles, even with a few senior players still missing, getting the job done against the Hawks in Melbourne. The Western Bulldogs, they'll be looking to bounce back after a disappointing loss to Richmond last week. They've had, I think, an 8 or 9 day break to think about it. They will take on Carlton, who had a very good win over the Bombers last week and have been in every game they've played this year. They haven't been blown away at any stage of the Blues. This will be a tight clash, but I think the top-end talent of the Bulldogs will be enough to get them over the line. I think if Bontempelli and Cripps go to each other, I'll be looking for that'll be worth the price of admission just to watch those two go at it if they do go to each other. And I hope they do. I hope the coaches put them head to head. The final match of the round is the one that's been rescheduled from Perth to the Gabba. It is the Brisbane Lions taking on the Fremantle Dockers. The COVID situation over there has seen this match being moved, and of course the Fremantle side will host the reciprocal clash later in the year. So, with that said, at the Gabba, after a good win against Port Adelaide last week, Fremantle were pretty disappointing in the Derby in Perth last week in front of no crowd. I can't see Fremantle getting the job done here against Brisbane. They'll be looking to bounce back after a really disappointing Derby, so I'm sure they'll dish it up to the Lions, but I think the Lions will just have a little bit too much with Hugh McCluggage in Brownlow medal top 5 contention. Don't worry about that. He mightn't win the medal, but he will absolutely feature at the back end of the year. He's been outstanding so far for the Brisbane Lions this season. So there it is. So that's the tips for this week. Hopefully they're a little bit better than last week. A bit of homework done this week to try and point you in the right direction. Let's see how we go. Back to you, Clayton.
Thanks, Jason. Just recapping on those tips, he went for Richmond, GWS, the Suns, the Kangas, Melbourne, Port Adelaide, the Eagles, the Bulldogs, and Brisbane. Good luck with your tipping. Hopefully he's picked you 9 winners or as many as he can, and we'll see how he goes and see where he gets himself. And will he creep back up the ladder? Yeah, I'm not really sure, but we'll wait and see. We're going to be chatting baseball coming up, and we've also got Caught with the Sports Express not too far away on the Flow Sports Fix on this Thursday evening.